Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee of Wednesday, the 18th of April. Do we have any apologies this morning? We do not.
Thank you, Convener. Sorry, no, we have apologies from Provost Malloy.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest on any of the items of business? We do not. We move on to item 3, which is, can we agree the minute of the meeting of the SP&R Committee of the 7th of February 18? Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Can we agree to note the minute of the Corporate Health and Safety and Wellbeing Consultative Committee of the 11th of December 17? Agreed. Can we agree to note the minute of the meeting of the IGB of the 26th of January 18? Agreed. We now move on to item 4, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report number 4, the final one of this year. And this is the 4th and final Revenue Monitoring Report for the current financial year, 17-18. And it also provides an update on the financial year 18-19. The report further underlines this Council's reputation for strong and prudent financial management. For 17-18, we anticipate a net projected underspend of 2.9 million on the General Fund revenue budget and a further 859,000 on the devolved school management budget and 450,000 on the pupil equity fund. The main variances are as follows. In Education and Children's Services, there is a net underspend of 1.33 million. In Housing and Community Safety, there is a projected net underspend of 817,000. Within the Environment Services, there is a projected net overspend of 58,000. This includes a projected overspend of 1.5 million on winter maintenance due to the winter that we've just endured. And finally, in Corporate and Democratic Services, there is a projected underspend of 266,000. Once again, I want to place on record my thanks to all the services for their continued application in achieving this position. It shows that we continue to apply rigorous financial management across this Council. The paper also provides the committee with an update on the additional funding for 17-18 of over 1.1 million from a number of sources, proposed environments and movements and reserves. Turning to 18-19, the report sets out a number of adjustments to the revenue budget, which was approved in February. Net additional funding of 3.8 million will be received by the Council from a number of sources. Furthermore, I welcome the Scottish Government's announcement of £10 million nationally for the local roads networks, and the final allocation to Perth Kinross will be reported at a future meeting of the SP&R Committee. The report also proposes a number of environments on movements on reserves for 18-19, which reflect operational requirements. Finally, the report advises elected members that Perth Kinross IGB has approved the recurring budget offer from the Council for 18-19. Overall, I am pleased the financial position. This Council continues to be sound, and I trust that members can approve the papers today. Are there any questions? Councillor Duggan.
Thanks, Convener. It's page 24, paragraph 2.1.2. It's an issue of language initially. I've got a number of questions, if that's all right, Convener. The second and final sentence of paragraph 2.1.2 speaks about specific proposals to utilise the underspends, which is not a language and makes reference then to the period about which the Council set its budget. It's not language that I'm used to. And can I just double check that what we're talking about there is the utilisation of budget flexibility? That's just as we do within the BRG process.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Duggan, for your question. I can confirm that's exactly what it is, budget flexibility.
Okay, thank you for that. Paragraph 2.1.5, as you mentioned in your introduction, Convener speaks of the 859,000 DSM slippage. Seems to me to be quite a large number, and I know that we always get slippage in this area of expenditure, so it's not unexpected in that regard. However, I would like reassurance about the containment of any potential negative impact on educational experiences of our young people by the thick end of £1 million not being spent. So I wonder if the committee could have that reassurance.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer that question. Councillor Dugan, in relation to the projected underspend of DSM, the total amount of £859,000 represents just over 1.1% of the total budget. It's broken down in relation to a number of underspends. The staffing part of that is the bulk of that, and that's £549,000. And that underspend is due to slippage that's been generated because recruitment hasn't been able to take place within the expected timescale. So the supplies and services aspect of the devolved school management budget, which is the bit that is used specifically for resources, is approximately £150,000 across all 83 schools. Some schools have no underspend, and some actually have a planned carry forward that constitutes some of that £150,000. So there is no detriment because of the underspend in terms of resources for young people. The difficulty remains in the recruitment of staff for schools.
Okay, that's very helpful, Convener.
Thank you.
Second last
supplementary,
question. If that's all right. Again, in your introduction, you spoke of the very timely application of £10 million by Scottish Government, and you're going to update committee at a future stage with the amount of that. Not that we should count our chickens before they've hatched, but my understanding is that our allocation of that will be in excess of £400,000. Is that your understanding?
My understanding is it will be around that figure.
Okay, that's excellent. And finally, Convener, thank you for your patience. The environments detailed in paragraph 5.9, I'm sure these are totally competent, otherwise they wouldn't appear in the paper, but the £53,000 additional legal support that's to be funded from health and social care, my understanding is that additional capacity is not required for legal activity of a health and social care basis. It's of an educational basis. Can I have that clarified? And if that is the case, is that ideal?
We'll get that clarification. Okay. Mrs. Simpson.
Yeah. That particular amount is entirely for health and social care. It's because the amount of guardianship and adult care and adult welfare applications has quadrupled since the IGB was in its inception year. And obviously, as you know, that's integral to the strategic plan because it's a key component of tackling delayed discharge. So the workload for that particular solicitor is one FTE for additional pressures that the IGB business is bringing our way.
Any further questions? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm referring to paragraph 2. The Environment Service. 2.1.11. The overspend on winter maintenance was 1.5 million projected in total. To what total does that raise the amount spent on winter maintenance? In other words, what is the scale of magnitude of the overspend against what was originally budgeted for that?
Okay, Mrs. Renton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott, for your question. You know, sort of the 1.5 million was what the best estimate that we had arrived at when we put the paper together. We've now got almost all the final accounts, and we're hoping that it will be less than the 1.5 million. So what we're looking at, the actual budget for winter is 3.7 million. So that that will bring the total to approximately 5 million to 5.2 million.
Okay, many thanks.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Band.
One question, Convener, if you don't mind. paragraph 2.1.3 finishes with a movement of £260,000 from the position last reported to committee. I know in my advancing years I'm expected to forget many things, but I don't think there'll be many people will remember what the last reported figure was. Would it be possible in future to include that kind of information as well? Just very similar to what to the question that Councillor Parrott asked in that respect.
Yeah, to give more context.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Councillor Lane?
Thanks, Convener. It's on page 39. I was just wondering if St Kenzie could explain to me where the reserves are moving from what the general fund was in March 2017 and what's projected the burn on reserves moving forward to 2021.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Ling, for your question. Members will recall that we put the reserve strategy, which was approved as part of the revenue budget, on the 22nd of February. So, in terms of the recommendations in the reserve strategy, we talk about the level of uncommitted reserves. So that's not the totality of the Council's cash reserves. There's a number of commitments against those, which are called earmarked reserves. But at that point, the estimate was around about £12 million, just over. That was based on the February revenue monitoring position, which was an underspend of just over £3.2 million. In a like-for-like comparable position, the underspend now in this paper is £2.9 million, so that's a movement of just over £300,000. So everything else being equal, that will give you a sense of the order of magnitude of movement in the Council's reserves. But there's a number of adjustments come through both the year and the final accounts process, which will impact on that figure.
Do you have any idea of what the effect is with the motion impact on reserves?
The motion and indeed the budget amendment, the motion and indeed the budget amendment made certain commitments against reserves, but I don't have a projection of that position against that figure at the moment, because there's obviously adjustments as we go through putting the final accounts together. So what I would say is that these are projections up to a point in time when we have an unaudited set of accounts for the year end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Can we agree the paper? Thank you. We now move on to paper 5, which is the Composite Capital Budget 17 to 23, Housing Investment Programme 17 to 22, and its monitoring report number 4. This report sets out current capital expenditure on the Council's composite and housing investment programmes. In total, £490 million is planned to be spent on the composite capital projects over the next 6 years, and a further £94 million on the housing programme, including the years 22-23. The delivery of the composite programme remains on course, with the net projected outrun for 17-18 currently estimated at £80 million. There have been increases in capital grant, property receipts, third-party contributions and revenue contributions, and therefore resulting in a reduced need for borrowing. Progress on the housing programme is also good, and with the projected outrun for the year estimated at £24 million, including £7.5 million towards the provision of affordable housing in Perth and Kinross. Overall, the report recommends a number of adjustments to the composite capital and housing programmes, mainly to align small revisions to phasing and expenditure and contributions to those reported to you in February. The report also includes very welcome proposals for road safety measures at Broich Road and Crieff, and also much needed increased car parking facilities at the Perth Crematorium to address the health and safety concerns there. The report shows good progress to date with the delivery of this programme, and I trust that members can support the recommendations in this paper. Do we have any questions? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much, Convener. I have just a query on page 65, 411. I'm very pleased to see that ex-council housing is being brought back, but I think we all realise that sometimes they've not been maintained to the normal standard. Indeed, in a couple that I've been involved in have had some rather unusual do-it-yourself jobs done over the years. And I wonder if this amount here allows for remedial works, and do we check these houses to make sure there's not some hidden things there? We're not just buying a council house, we're buying something that may have been mucked about with, you know. And is there an allowance within those figures?
Thank you, Councillor Simpson, for the question. Yes, I can confirm that that includes, you know, sort of money for remedial work as well.
Further questions, Councillor Duggan?
Thank you very much, Convener. I have a number of questions, but I canter through them if that's all right with you. The first one is on page 59, paragraph 3.3.4, and it relates to the proposal to rephase £300,000 from Perth High School from 2017, 5 years down the road, to 2022-23. Now, I would imagine perhaps that's a pragmatic move in anticipation of a replacement programme coming online as a result of the proposals that were contained in the SNP's capital budget last year. I very much hope that that is the case. However, I don't know if you've ever been in Perth High School, but £300,000 wouldn't look at the condition, at the immediate conditional imperatives that are in that building. So can I ask what the basis of that rephasing is, Convener, please?
Okay, you can. Mrs Devlin?
Councillor Duggan, the amount of money, you're absolutely right, is relatively small in terms of the whole programme overall, and it's just simply a rephasing of some of the works. You'll appreciate that with schools, unless we're able to decant large parts or indeed the whole of a school, then we need to utilise holiday periods for bits and pieces of work to be undertaken, and this is just simply linked to a rephasing of some of the more minor works, and the fact that we haven't needed to spend as much on some of those minor works within the immediate timescale as we had anticipated.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Okay. Just below that, there's a number of proposed movements from 18-19 into future years, so we don't know when that is within the Composite Capital Programme for projects including modernising primaries, Perth Academy and refurbishments to Perth Grammar School. So can we get some reassurance that these aren't getting kicked into the long grass and that these will be realised on the ground sometime soon, please?
I think they're all under consideration, but Mrs Devlin will give you an update.
Certainly, there's a number of different programmes within there, Councillor Duggan, and the sums of money within each of them are again relatively small. For example, within one of the programmes, it's a sum of £29,000 that is being moved, and it's simply just a rephasing in terms of trying to programme the works around the school calendar year rather than have the whole 52 weeks of the year to be able to undertake a range of the works.
Okay. I think in step with one of Councillor Band's observations, Convener, it might be an idea to have a little bit more specific. That's a perfectly reasonable explanation, but you wouldn't get that from the paper.
Just to reassure you that the school estate is one of this administration's priorities.
Okay, thank you. Paragraph 3.4.14. I'm very disappointed, and I'm sure other members are also, to see that it's proposed to reduce the street lighting and LED column replacement by 223,000. The rationale given is that that's in line with the current works programme. That's been a hugely successful programme that's proceeded with, that's progressed with some pace over recent years. And whilst it's not been without its issues, I think it's generally accepted as a good thing. And so that's a disappointment that I'd appreciate some clarity over.
Mrs Renton.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Duggan. You know, sort of, that's actually a helpful question because it allows us to clarify that position.
I do try.
It's not. It's not a reduction in the programme. It's just that the cost of the units has reduced, and so therefore the cost of borrowing has reduced. And it's just to realign the budget on that basis. So the programme continues, and we are generating the savings that we had anticipated, but it's just to, you know, sort of to make sure that we're covering the costs or not taking on too much borrowing because the units have reduced in price.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Paragraph 3.5.3, Convener, on page 63 speaks of a rephasing in regard to the Letham Wellbeing Hub, and talks about work commencing in April 18, which of course, thank thankfully we're now in. Can I be assured by officers that the original ambition and timescales for the Lethen Wellbeing Hub will still be met?
Okay. Mr. Valentine or Mrs. Renton? Or
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Dugan. Yes, the Lethen Wellbeing Hub, we are currently in discussions with the community. We're trying to flesh out the operating model for the facility, and that has taken a bit longer than we had anticipated. So the timescale might slip on the Lethen Wellbeing Hub.
Okay, and what role are you anticipating elected members playing in that consultation?
We need to get through the next round, and then we will come back to elected members with what the community proposal is. There's just a few areas of concern that have arisen.
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Second last one, Convener, it's the paragraph 4.9. It speaks about the additional investment in Blackthorn Place in Blairgowrie, and it speaks of a new total of nearly £2.6 million. Can I ask how many council-owned units will be available at the end of that investment?
Mrs. Renton?
Thank you again for the question. It will be 24.
That's fine, thank you. And finally, Convener, thank you again for your patience. Paragraph 4.11, again on housing, informs us about an increase in buyback activity. If we're proposing to invest a total of £1.128 million in buybacks, how much will Scottish Government be investing on top of that?
Again, Mrs.
Thank you again for the question. It will be £1.2 million.
Okay, very welcome. Thank you, Convener.
Further questions? Councillor Parrott?
Convener, thank you. I'm on page 66 at paragraph 4.13. Additional income, I'm sure, is always welcome, but I note there's an additional income of nearly £12,000 per plot from the new builder at Muirton. That seems a considerable change from an original plan, perhaps. Can someone give me clarification as to how that additional income has come about? Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Barrett, might be able to help.
My microphone's not working.
Is it,
Yeah, this isn't actually additional income, it's just delayed income that was originally agreed way back at the outset of the project. So that's the income that's now coming to us. So it's not additional. We did understand that we would be getting it, it's just been delayed and it's coming in now.
So am I perhaps right in understanding that this income was always going to be accrued? It simply wasn't known which year it would be accrued in?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett?
Yeah, the income is £11,750 per unit sold. So as the units are sold, the income is generated and paid to the council. So it is additional income because it's money that we receive, but it's not unplanned income.
Councillor McCall?
Thank you, Convener. I have two questions, if I may. The first one is a follow-up to Councillor Dugan's question on page 59, 3.3.5, in relation to Perth Academy refurbishments being rephased. There are a number of quite urgent repairs and maintenance issues associated with Perth Academy that I have indeed discussed with the officers. Can I seek reassurance that those that are planned for this summer are still going ahead and will not be rephased?
Okay. Mrs. Devlin?
The short answer to your question is that that's my understanding too, Councillor McCall. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And the second question is on page 61, on point 3.4.10, the Community Green Space Programme. While I think it's very welcome that investment in our green space is taking place, I'm a little dismayed that there is no reference to the Buckie Braes site and the work that is absolutely required to halt the creeping deterioration of the overall site. Buckie Braes, as I'm sure most people in this room will appreciate, is a long-standing green space that is well used not only by residents in my ward over many generations, but also by the wider population in Perth. However, in recent years, it's evidently suffering from a lack of care and attention, with fallen trees being left in situ and overgrowing flora encroaching into paths and open spaces. Essentially, it's growing in on itself, and if left uncared for, it will soon cease to be a safe and accessible place for the public. And while I appreciate the approach of letting nature take its course, a balance must be found that also ensures the viability of this much-loved green space site for current and future generations. So can you advise me of the immediate maintenance plans for Buckie Braes to address the urgent remedial work required and the longer-term strategy to ensure Buckie Braes remains an accessible and enjoyable space for generations to come?
Thank you very much for your question. Mrs. Renton.
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCall. Unfortunately, I don't have that detail, but, Willie Young is here, and I'm going to ask Willie Young to come back to you, as soon as possible with a response.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Lane? Oh, Councillor Barrett. Well, okay.
I'll go while Peter tries to get his microphone to work. Thanks, Convener. I'd just like some comfort that the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre will be started in 2019 as was proposed and finished in 2020. And also, I'd like some comfort on the Perth City Hall project, as it is it is the major project in here.
Well, firstly, Councillor Lane, you asked numerous questions about Blairgowrie Recreation Centre on Monday, and you had what I would call open and straightforward answers to all your questions. So I don't see why you have to repeat them today, including the question of timing.
Well, the timing was not given, so I'm asking. There was a meeting.
Timing was given. You were told that the project was on plan, and timing was.
No, I was told there was a strategic, some sort of investment group meeting that day to decide what was moving forward. So I'm asking for an update. I think it's quite reasonable that I was told that there was a meeting that day.
There's no change, but I'm happy for officers. Mr. Valentine will respond.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Lane. Yes, as regards Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, there's no change in the programme. The Perth City Hall proposals, the programme is still as we have committed to, but it is dependent upon the finalisation of the Tay City deal.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Barrett, his microphone's now working. Apologies, Councillor Donaldson.
Happy to give way once. The report makes mention of the Scottish Government's intervention with Oudenarde and taking over the planning application process there. Do we have any indication of how long the process is going to be delayed by their intervention? And I've got another question after that.
Thank you. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. No, we don't have an indication. We spoke to the developer. The developer asked to speak to the council last night, and they're quite keen to pursue the matter with Scottish Government, but it is a matter between Scottish Government and the developer.
Thank you for that. I think one of the striking things about this report are the graphs on pages 67 and 68, which illustrate performance of spend against budget and the projected outcomes, particularly with regard to the housing investment programme, where the projected outcome was 118% of budget compared to 115% of budget last year, which demonstrates the accelerated realisation of these projects. Is there any further update that we can have as to what the final year figures are looking like?
Claire, Mrs. Miller, is it? Yep.
We anticipate it be 125% spend on the opening budget. That's our projected year-end figure, and that will be finalised over the next few weeks.
Thank you. Page 63.44, the ongoing saga of Broich Road, and I would just comment that I'm glad to see that progress is now being made, but I do want to ask 2 points. First of all, it states it is anticipated that the pass will attract Sustrans funding of 60,000. Could I just ask when it is hoped that the full funding package will be in place? And secondly, related to that, when is it hoped that actual work will commence on the improvements to improve road safety and, in particular, pedestrian safety.
Okay. Mrs. Renton or Mr. Haggart?
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, it's a little bit early to say how quickly we can anticipate success or otherwise with discussions with Surstrans. In the preparation of the paper, we hadn't had an opportunity to speak with them. However, we are confident with our positive relationships with them and with their support for other cycling and walking related projects. We do anticipate to have some success, but it's too early. I'm simply predicting. And in terms of the construction of the improvements, my team are preparing the detailed design and will be consulting on that very, very shortly. Depending on the success of that, we'll be able to furnish you with more accurate dates in due course.
I'd also add that I'm sure that your attention and fellow councillors in the Strathearn ward will be on this project and will keep our officers up to speed should there be any slippage.
Briefly follow up. Would you be hopeful to perhaps begin construction and the work during the course of this calendar year? Or is that difficult to?
I'm not known for my positivity, but I would hope so. I would hope so. I remain confident that the local elected members and the community indeed will be pleased with the improvements that are being proposed, and subject to that local support, I'll certainly be driving it forward as quickly as we can. But of course, it depends on the feedback that we have from the community in due course.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Convener. Just an update for the committee. Late yesterday afternoon, we received confirmation of the Surstrans grant offer. So we have that in writing.
Good. Supplementary?
No, could I ask one separate question?
Okay.
And it's on the next page, page 61. We are going to be having a meeting with 3 ward councillors on the Comrie flood prevention scheme next week. I think it's next Tuesday, and that's welcome. But can I ask under 3.4.8 on page 61, it's a multi-million pound scheme, clearly 80% funded by the Scottish Government, but it's got in here, it is proposed to accelerate 188,000 from 2021 to 17-18. Could I just, because that's quite a chunky sum of money, could I just ask what that entails, what that amount actually involves?
Yep, sure you can. Mrs. Renton?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That's just simply a rephasing of the budget to align with what we're working on at the moment, which is outline design. So we're working on an outline design of the Comrie Flood project. That will be highlighted to yourself and given details next week. So it's simply rephasing the numbers. The initial numbers were put in just on an estimate basis a couple of years ago, so we're just rephasing it. So.
Okay, any further questions? Yep, can we have a...
It's kind of both a question and a comment. It would be, I think, remiss of us when we're considering the capital budget and programme not to light on the T-Cities deal. The T-Cities deal, I would say, is performing more slowly in terms of progress than Continental Drift. And I think there is all party and cross-party support in this council to see us reach a speedy decision on the T-Cities deal and the impact that it is going to have on our capital programme. To that end, I wonder whether it would be a useful suggestion if all political and group leaders were to invite both ministers of the UK and the Scottish Government to a meeting to see if we could get a hard timetable for a decision on the T-Cities deal.
From my own perspective, I'm happy to do that. I have already written to the Scottish Secretary requesting a visit from him and also requesting that we make more timely progress with this whole project, and I'm sure Councillor Duggan will support me in this.
I'm very happy to play my part in anything that expedites the Tay Cities deal, which holds great promise, as Councillor Barrett sets out, for Perth and Kinross within the Tay Cities area. I think, Councillor Barrett, as you and I have discussed, Convener, I think Councillor Barrett and every other elected member in Perth and Kinross Council will find out very shortly that the Tay Cities deal and its progress will be changing gear just very shortly. But I think Councillor Barrett's request is entirely in step with many discussions and actions you and I have taken behind the scenes on the Tay Cities deal, and I'd have no hesitation in continuing that cross-party work.
Good. Thank you for your cooperation. And I will update you on progress, Councillor Duggan, first opportunity.
It's just a brief comment, and you know, I think I would like to echo your gratitude for the work that officers have done in compiling a very comprehensive report. It's an observation that I've made before at committee, Convener, before you were in the chair, and it's the inception of many, if not all, of these projects being before May 2017. And it's a concern that I've got, given the nature and gestation of large capital projects, that if this administration is to make its mark on Perth and Kinross, then it's going to need to come forward with significant initiatives and vision. And I don't see any evidence of that in this update. And I recall indication that you gave, albeit not from the chair, that when the administration is ready to come forward with its new projects, then it will be updating this committee. This isn't a question, Convener, because we're not in questions. It's just a comment to say that I look forward to seeing evidence of this administration's vision for Perth and Kinross in terms of capital investment.
And the comment response is that I'm sure you're aware there's a budget process coming in June where we will be updating the capital budget, and at that point you will see the strategy of this administration. Thank you. Move on to paper 6. This is the annual review of cyber security. The annual review of cyber security report is intended to give a high-level overview of the cyber risks that the Council is exposed to and the actions that have been taken to reduce those risks to an acceptable level. The report shows that the Council is defending itself against hundreds of thousands of low-level malicious events every month. In addition to the recorded events, the Council is also fending off hundreds of thousands of malicious probe scans every day. These are far too numerous to log and count, but be assured we have been successful so far. As a defender, the Council, like all other organisations, must defeat every attack on its systems, while our attackers, unfortunately, need only to succeed once. To eliminate risk completely is an impossible task, even with unlimited resources. We need, therefore, to be risk-based, taking a risk-based approach, following the principles of resilience set out by the Scottish Government. It is vital that our staff are trained to identify cyber threats as quickly as possible and to respond and recover as effectively as possible. Cyber threats change rapidly, and as a Council we must continue to adapt and respond to these risks as and when they are identified. I am assured by this report and pleased to note that the annual independent assessment of our work and our network security is satisfied that the Council network will run securely configured. Those vulnerabilities identified within the assessment have been addressed, ensuring that our network continues to robustly defend the Council services from cyber attack. I'm happy to support this paper. Do we have any questions? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm on page 95, paragraph 5.1c. I have to say the first sentence there causes me still to wince, given severe angst on at least one occasion in my past. But my question is the new government scheme, accepting that privacy markings are different from classification, I'm still slightly surprised that all information within the Council is possibly contained within one classification, and I'd welcome clarity on that. And the final sentence, the council currently has no formal classification scheme. That somehow begs the question of, is one needed, even if it's only a very short statement of fact? Thank you.
Sorry? Donald, Mr. Henderson. Sorry, my apologies. Can't see anyone.
Thank you, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. The government classification scheme does correctly classify all information held by a local authority as one class, which we have always felt was less than useful. The council has not adopted a classification scheme. It has proved very hard to come up with something that slotted inside the government classification scheme that we felt would be workable. I agree that the need for one is maybe questionable, but we continue to keep it under review.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. I have to confess I was one of the 25% of people who clicked on the simulated phishing attack, and I'm embarrassed to say so. But I thought it was useful, and I wonder if we intend to do it again, so hopefully we'll see a decrease in the number of people like me that are caught out by it.
Unfortunately, we had budget for 1 year's use of the tool. We don't have any further budget allowance for that. We will review that in coming years.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My question is on page 94 on 5.1, specifically around grey procurement. I'd be interested to know what or how many instances there have been of some of these platforms or tools being used within the council and what security risks they've posed to us.
Okay. Mr. Henderson again.
Unfortunately,
don't have that information to hand. Don't have that information to hand, Councillor, but we can get you some more detail and I can give you that out with the meeting.
Thank you. I look forward to getting that information.
Any further questions, comments? Read paper. Paper 7. Implementation of the General Data Protection Regulation. The General Data Protection Regulation is a major piece of legislation further regulating how personal information is gathered, used, shared and secured. It makes significant changes to the way we process personal information and imposes far greater penalties for breach or non-compliance with the legal provisions. The regulation itself becomes law on the 25th of May 18, and the Council as a public authority must comply with those provisions. Work has been underway since the regulation was approved in 2016 to ensure that processes are comprehensively revised to reflect the new legal obligations and to develop and deliver training and awareness raising sessions for staff. Further work needs to be done in terms of revising policies and more detailed procedures. However, this has been delayed as we wait for UK legislation, which is still working its way through Parliament. This report provides an update of the work done to date and the further work programme. Members should note that good progress has been made and ensuring close compliance with the legislation remains our priority. I am happy to support the paper if you have any questions. Councillor Park.
Convener, thank you. I'm on page 104, paragraph 6.1. And I note the intent that the data protection officer responsibilities will be taken on by the information compliance manager. Whilst I accept entirely that the individual may well be qualified for both, it concerns me slightly that putting our eggs in one basket, so to speak, in terms of both roles, does little to enhance the strength of our checks and balances. And I'd be grateful for reassurance that the proposed move is entirely appropriate and strong for what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Simpson.
I can confirm that as part of that, in terms of designating the statutory data protection officer, the current information compliance manager was both skilled and experienced in terms of the requirements of the legislation. What we then need to do is restructure that information compliance team to ensure that there's a proper separation of duties and that the ordinary day-to-day business in terms of information compliance per se that's out with the statutory role of the Data Protection Act is adequately covered within the team. So that's part of the trickle down from that will be dealt with in terms of how we then restructure that team and allocate new duties.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Bailey? No.
Thank you, Convener. I welcome the work that's been done recently by members of the press to expose the allegations that this council might have some form of watch list of persons who need to be dealt with in certain ways by the council. I wonder whether the GDPR regulation means that we're now obliged to contact those persons to inform them about our mechanism of processing that data that we allegedly hold about them.
Mr. Henderson.
Convener, Councillor, the requirements don't change from the Data Protection Act 1998 to the GDPR. The requirements are exactly the same.
Okay. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. The risk assessments tabled on page 107 of the pack have four risks, all of which are either of medium impact and high probability. Risk 1 has an ask of senior management in terms of support sought to prioritise and resource activities. Can we have a clarification as to how that request has been met?
I can confirm that this has been discussed with the Corporate Management Group and the EOT, and we're all aware of what needs to be done. Part of the risks flow from the fact that we don't actually have the legislation yet, but as I say, these are all in hand. And in terms of a lot of these risks, they will be no different from any other public authority in the country because we're all in the same predicament. But we can be absolutely assured that the senior management team are fully aware of the obligations under the GDPR and fully committed to compliance.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. This is a matter that came up at Audit Committee. I must say it's a matter that, this paper is clearly written before the end of March. And I must say I think it's a matter that has to be of considerable concern because we're talking about a mandatory position 5 weeks from this Friday. So could I just ask the head of legal, has she been given any indication, along with her colleagues and other local authorities in Scotland, just on the state of the UK legislation as to when we will get detailed clarification as to what the provisions are?
I know that this is a daily concern for Mr. Henderson, so I'll ask him to answer that question.
The bill is waiting its third reading in Commons, and when I last looked last week, that had not yet been scheduled.
Could I just also ask, as a supplementary, we've got on page 102 the timescale for a subject access request reduces from 40 days to 28 days, and the ability to charge a fee is completely removed. Can I just ask, post the 25th of May, are we in a position that we can meet such requests? Because one would expect there'd be quite a marked upturn, especially if no fee is applied.
Do you want to address that?
Mr. Henderson again.
Convener, Councillor, we currently have 4 staff working on both FOI requests and subject access requests. They still have a small amount of spare capacity. We will continue to review the situation in terms of the number of subject access requests. We have no idea whether there will be more or not.
One final point, and that relates to ourselves as councillors. I take it that provision is being made for training of councillors, because I must say I'm concerned, how do I handle data for constituents what should I do, what is the law, and I think that applies to all of us.
No, I can give you assurance there will be training for councillors. As I say, part of the delay, we had hoped that we would have the legislation so that some of the finer points can be dealt with, but there will be a programme of training for councillors.
Thanks, Convener. If the Facebook debacle didn't prove anything, it proved that there's no free lunch, and if you're using the internet for any purpose, your data can be taken. I was wondering if that, especially within schools or anything, if they're using teaching aids or anything, is there proper checks that the data that is entered by children is not stored and taken elsewhere?
I would hope so. But,
we are working specifically with schools on that very subject at the moment. We are trying to ensure that any new tool of any kind has its privacy impact properly assessed before anyone starts using it.
Thanks, and will we be doing that retrospectively as well?
Resources permitting, we will.
any further questions? Comments? Agree the paper? We now move on to paper 8, Transformation Programme. Paper before you illustrates the progress with the transformation projects which the Council has in train and proposes the further phase of transformation projects for your approval. The current completed projects provide the Council with 1.8 million of recurring savings across the board, a broad range of activities from digital management, redesigning refuse collection, and the target is to make £8 million of savings annually by the end of the current phase. The new projects which are being asked to consider focus mainly on the opportunities around smart energy generation, low carbon, and the opportunities for income generation from events and sponsorship. The paper also highlights the continuing requirement for the staff capacity to support this work. Council staff continue to demonstrate their initiative and creativity in coming forward with these projects, and I am happy to support the paper. Do we have any questions? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. It is all good news in this paper, almost all good news. I do have a query on page 118 under Building Ambition in EECS and the review of catering services. Now, I'm obviously not quite as old as Councillor Ban, but I serve the same similar memory lapses occasionally, and I'm thinking back 14, 15 years ago when I first went to Tayside Contracts, and we were discussing this very thing then. I can think even further back 40 odd years ago when I was the catering manager at Timex, and we introduced a very similar system to this then. So I think my question is, none of this is new. We've been talking about it for 15 years. This goes on until 2020. Could we get an idea of time scale as to either what the problems are with coming to the decision, or can we have a time scale?
Thank you. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. There have been challenges, as you say, in trying to get agreement across the authorities in terms of the catering solution. We have a new proposal which we were presented with yesterday, which will be discussed at the next Governance and Strategy Group at Tayside Contracts. Following on from that discussion, it will be reported back to the respective councils.
Hopefully shortly. Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I think following on from Councillor Simpson's questions and comments, the content of this report, whilst extremely important in terms of scrutiny of the transformation programme and making sure that the Council is achieving its milestones and its projected savings, which is extremely important, it's also, I think, a particularly dry read. And I think that the report report might actually benefit by being illustrated with some case studies of some of the successful transformation programmes that the Council has undertaken, and perhaps even some of the unsuccessful ones. But in terms of the former, the Modernising Governance Member Officer Working Group at the start of this week had presentations on two tremendous transformation programmes which have been carried out within the Housing and Communities Service, both with regard to the Home First project, which has had great outcomes for people in Perth and Kinross, reducing the length of time that homeless people have had to stay in temporary accommodation, moving individuals and families quicker into settled accommodation, and reducing considerably, in fact by millions of pounds, the amount of money spent on temporary accommodation. And we also heard about the significant improvements that have been made in the Council's repairs service to council houses through more efficient scheduling and more in-house work being carried out. And I think those sort of case studies highlighting this report would actually bring home the reality and the success of transformation in this Council, and it might be useful if we can incorporate an example into future reports.
Okay, thank you. I would concur, because the presentation we had on Monday was definitely one of the best presentations I've had since I became a councillor, and was absolute joy to our ears, I think, and those of all of us who attended. Any further questions? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My question is on page 119, the Vehicle Fleet Utilisation and Optimisation Programme, and specifically around the use and application of telematics. Can we be advised if the telematics solution has been selected, and if and when it is going to be deployed in the council vehicles? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. You know, it has already been selected, and we're already, they're on all of our vehicles now, and and every manager now receives a report, based on, the information that the system is telling them, so that they can then have conversations about their staff in terms of what that detail is telling them. So I know from speaking to managers that the system is in place and is working.
Supplementary?
Supplementary, please, yes. So perhaps you can advise when the system was installed and deployed completely across the network, the vehicle network, and when do you expect to be able to see any supplementary benefits from the information that the system provides, and what those values might be at?
Thank you. All the track
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Comments, Councillor Duggan.
Thanks very much, Convener. It's in relation to Appendix 3, which we're specifically asked to approve in the paper. I've got no hesitation in approving the items on Appendix 3. I wish to touch on an issue that Councillor Barrett raised. It was raised on Monday at the MOG, but I have no hesitation in raising an issue again at a service committee, even though it was raised at a MOG, unless the head of Democratic Services can tell me that that's not competent. I don't see any reason why any elected member shouldn't raise an issue at a service committee that they deem as appropriate for the public interest, the press and fellow councillors. And I speak for all SNP councillors when I say that. So that being said, it's on the Home First issue, which Councillor Barrett raised. All these things on Appendix 3 are excellent developments and excellent ways that we are modernising the way that the council does its business, but not all of them are transformative, but Home First is transformative. And whilst this works away quietly in the background, making a tremendous difference to people in no small measure of distress in the homeless sector, the team within that service are achieving great results, massively improving outcomes and saving the council money in a greatly more efficient service, and we should be very, very grateful for the work that they've done, and Mrs Mailer in particular leading that work with her colleagues. And I would urge all councillors, whether on this committee or not, if they don't know what Home First is, they should make it a priority to find out.
Thank you very much for your comments. I concur with all your comments, really, and I have no objection to it being a point being raised at this committee that was raised on Monday, but it was just the persistent questioning on Monday and again persistence again today that came to my attention. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of the committee. Thank you very much for your time and patience. Oh, sorry, ma'am. Sorry. Joint Consultative Committee, one member to be appointed to the Joint Consultative Committee. Do we have a member?
If you don't have a name, it can be intimated to me.
We'll pass it on, yep. I've never seen it, so it's not. Charitable and Public Trust administered by the Council. Note that Councillor Stewart is automatically appointed as Vice Convener of the SPNR Committee. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your patience. Close the meeting.